cybersecurity isn't a whole lot different than like physical security. So you think about it, you have a store and you're selling stuff in your store. There's always going to be some level of risk that somebody's going to take the things out of your store without paying for it. So like, what level of risk are you okay with?
Welcome back to the Main Street Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Skip Ranke, and today I am excited to have Matt Phelps with us. He is going to talk with us about something that is super important for every small business, and pay attention to this because it is really important. He's got a lot of information. He's a wealth of knowledge. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Skip.
And thank you for joining us, but tell us a little bit about yourself, where you work, and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm actually a cybersecurity engineer. I worked in various roles in IT for a long time. I ended up in security. Specifically, I work in application security. So basically what that means is I try to analyze the risk of different applications, try to make sure that our applications that we sell to our customers are safe before we give them to customers.
Right.
So I work for a company called Crowdstrike. We sell basically futuristic antivirus, if you know what antivirus is, but it's more, it's not antivirus, it's more trying to detect and stop adversaries. So it's a cool company to work for. We have a pretty cool mission. So
awesome.
I'm
How long
happy
you been
to
there?
work there? I've been there for 2 years now.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's really exciting. I enjoy it.
Good.
Have a lot of fun.
Well, that's the main thing. You got to enjoy what you do. So when we talk about cybersecurity, what are some of the benefits about having a cybersecurity strategy for your business? I mean, we have a lot of people that I've talked to in the past. They say, don't worry about it. I don't have to deal with it. It's not that big of a deal. So what are some of the benefits about having that as a small business?
Well, I do a lot with risk at my job. And so I think everything kind of comes back to risk. So
depending on the company too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that has to play into the role, I suppose.
yeah, but like having a strategy kind of lets you know how much risk you're okay with. So if you go in, you're saying like, kind of head in the sand, I don't really know, I'm not going to really care about what's going on. You don't know how much risk you're willing to accept, versus if you have a strategy, you can then pretty much put down on paper, make a plan, say, okay, I have this amount of risk that I'm willing to take,
Right.
Versus I'm not okay with this level of risk. And then you can kind of make decisions based off of that. So I kind of look at it as like cybersecurity isn't a whole lot different than like physical security. So you think about it, you have a store and you're selling stuff in your store. There's always going to be some level of risk that somebody's going to take the things out of your store without paying for it. So like, what level of risk are you okay with? Are you going to put security cameras everywhere in all places? Are you going to lock the doors? Or are you just going to say, hey, nobody's going to take anything. I'm just going to leave the doors unlocked. I'm going to just have a free for all. So it's like, what level do you want to go?
That's interesting you put it in that perspective, because I'm as you're talking about this, I'm thinking back about everything that we do, and then I'm thinking about all the things that some of our clients do and some of my friends do. And everybody's on different areas of the spectrum. Not one person is the same.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so I wonder, so when you talk about that, I mean, and we talked about a little bit about this before we started, if there's insurance policies for cybersecurity. So in my mind's eye, in my thought process, is that if there's an insurance policy for it, you probably should have a strategy for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of these insurance policies out here that have kind of, they're somewhat recent. I would say in the last like 10 years or so that some of these have been starting to pop up. It's kind of interesting with them because they're a double-edged sword in my opinion.
All right.
Too. Like, yes, you're right. Like, obviously, if there's insurance for it, you got to think about it. But it is a little bit crazy because a lot of times the bad guys also know that there's insurance policies. So sometimes they'll actually target you and they'll say, if they know you have an insurance policy, they'll say, well, you can afford it if I attack you. Versus if you don't have an insurance policy, they might go after bigger fish to fry. So
well,
it's
that's
kind
interesting.
So like there's risk there too. It's like, yes, you could have an insurance policy.
So there's
but
a
is
risk
it
of having
always-
it.
Yeah. So it's something to think about too.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not a one size fits all the time.
That's a really interesting point. Because so how would they even know that you have that though?
that's the other point too. Like, are you advertising it? Are they advertising it if the insurance company has a breach themselves that leaks out their client list? So definitely something to think about.
Okay, you just brought something up that just popped up a little bubble in my head. When some of these larger companies or organizations, or it doesn't even matter what they are, when they get hacked or they get breached. You hear, oh, they had a breach. Citi Card had a breach, or with the Chase, whatever the bank that had a breach. When they get in there, what are they really going for? I mean, are they going for just your personal identification, then to go and use somewhere, and then how does that all play? Do they just grab your information and then they try to use it everywhere and across the web, or what?
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting because there's been a little bit of a shift in the landscape, I feel like, over the last several years or so. So initially, a lot of times when you think of like the term hacker or hacker group, you think like maybe some really smart people sitting behind a keyboard trying to like find ways to break things. And that more or less, it does exist, but a lot of times those people, they don't necessarily want your information, so they'll build these hacks or build these ways in, and then they'll sell it to these other hacker groups that maybe they don't really have as much technical experience or knowledge, but they're in it to make money. So if the people who are trying to make money end up in a system, what they're trying to do is they're looking for anything that they can get to make money. So if there's like usernames and passwords in their mind, they can say like, oh, I can take that and I can try it at a bunch of different bank places. I could try it on different websites. I could try it like on Facebook so that I can post a bunch of posts about some company to try to generate money or whatever. So they might be looking for usernames and passwords. Identity theft is another one. If they could find enough information to like spin up credit cards or loans or whatever.
Right.
So a lot of times the groups, what they're looking for is they're looking for ways to make money, which actually, fun fact, I was reading recently that a lot of these kind of like hacker groups that are trying to make money, they actually are starting to develop like support teams and HR teams and all these like other like
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy because like
So it's like it's its own business.
Yeah, there's like a huge business that's
And it's illegal.
It is, yeah.
That's even like the oxymoron of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, when you talk about hackers, we have so many websites, and we have one person, Jenny, in our organization. That's all she does is works on the back end of the websites to make sure that they're safe and as safe and secure as they possibly can be. Yeah. I mean, there's always somebody out there smarter than the other guy, Yeah. But they're trying. We get like malicious login attempts and all these different things on our website constantly. Yeah. I mean, there's no information in there for them to really do anything with. So what's the point? I mean, are they just doing it just to take you down? I've always been asking, just kind of, why would you try to take down a printing company site? There's nothing there.
Actually, I had a WordPress site that I was running personally, just for fun. I posted like some pictures. I posted some pictures of Mountain Dew because I was like, hey, I was doing a school project and I thought it'd be fun to post a bunch of pictures. And it was a WordPress site. Hackers got in, and so it really fascinated me because like what they ended up doing, because I'm like, why do they want some college kid's website?
Yeah.
And what they ended up doing is they used that to host their own content. So they like created like a special secret page on the website that had like it looked like a login form.
Okay.
And then they used that link to like send out to people to try to steal more usernames and passwords. So they just needed a place to store content. And typically, if you go to like a web host, you're going to need a credit card. You're going to need some kind of identification to be able to host stuff on the internet. Anything you host on the internet is usually traceable. Like even if you go get like a free place to put something, or like you go to Google and you want to put some documents somewhere, you're going to need some identifying material. But if you take over somebody else's website, you can, hey, it's a free place to host content that isn't really traceable back to you. So sometimes,
so they're using that. So they're using that site with that IP, and it's not them. It's not even registered to them.
Yeah, because then if
makes sense,
the officials come back and say, "Hey, who's hosting this password stealer content?"
Yeah,
and it's like, "Oh, well, it's this random plumbing company," and then it's like, "Well, where do you go from there?" Like they got taken over. Like, how do you trace that back?
No. So then the liability. Oh wow. So that's why we have to have the insurances that we have, because if that happens, then we have to be able. So it's a vicious circle, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
it's just always chasing its tail.
I
So,
bet.
what are some of the no-nos that when you talk about a business and they have what are some of the biggest no-nos that you've seen in the cybersecurity world or in the security world in that what that you could bring a small business owners should not do?
Yeah, I had a couple. I think one thing that I did want to say is that I see a lot of interesting password usage,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So it's kind of interesting because over time we've kind of trained people to create passwords that are easy to guess, but that are very hard for humans to remember. So you see like these password complexity algorithms where it's
Yeah.
like you need like lowercase, uppercase, symbol. It needs to be 12 characters. It needs to be like all these different things. And so what happens? You see people that are like, oh, I'm going to use the same password for my business, my personal, my
Oh
everything
yeah.
else, and it's like all crossed, and then they don't know what to do with the password because it's very hard to remember, and so then they put it like on a post-it note, or they write it on a whiteboard, or they save it somewhere where anybody can potentially see it.
Yeah.
So I know there's a government organization called NIST. Uh, they do like standards around information security,
Yeah.
and they're actually starting to, and I'm hoping this trend continues, they're starting to think about like, hey, how do we do passwords better for users? So like, for example, using a passphrase versus like a password can be better. So like, let's say uh, you have like a couple different words that are seemingly unrelated. So let's say I'm looking around the room here, I see a candle,
Mm-hmm.
I see a camera, and I see a chair. So it's maybe you have a password that's like chair, candle, camera, or something like that, or and then add a couple different other words that people might not know. So then you could like put in something like
But the name of my car is Betty.
yeah. So if
Whatever.
Betty is something that means something to you, so you can say like Betty candle with the camera chair,
Okay.
and then it's like, well, does that really make sense to anybody else? But it's a little bit easier to remember.
Yeah.
And if you have to put like a letter in there, you could, or I'm sorry, a number in there, you could toss a number in there. But having like a big phrase, so now you think about a Betty candle with the camera chair, like
24.
yeah, 24,
Would make no sense to anybody.
no sense to anybody,
But
but
you.
it's a little bit easier to remember. You might not need to write it down.
That's
So
interesting.
that's one good thing. One thing you can do with passwords. The other potential thing you can do is use a password manager.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of browsers have these built in now, where they'll actually save your passwords for you. So if you have a different password for your bank and for your social media, because
Right.
obviously like banking is a little bit different than social media, so
Right.
you might want to keep those separate. You can use these built-in password managers.
Are
That,
they safe though?
yes, sometimes they do get breached. There's
Like
been a
Google's
couple.
password manager. Is that? I mean, it's Google, right? They should be safe. I mean, are they that safe?
The one that's built into Chrome, it runs locally. So, and
It's
it
as
may
safe
be
as yeah. It
safer.
may be. It's as safe as
Yeah.
it probably can be.
There's some other ones. I know there's like one called like 1Password 7.
Mm-hmm.
I use one called Bitwarden that I like a lot.
All right.
Basically, what they do is so you store your information with them in the cloud, but they encrypt it with a value that only you know. So the idea is that if they ever do get breached, they're storing it responsibly on their side,
Okay.
so that you're the only person who can unencrypt it even on their side. So like even if
Oh, so they wouldn't even have the ability
yeah,
to
they
do it.
wouldn't even have
And
the
that's what's that
ability.
called? Bitwarden?
Yeah,
Okay.
Bitwarden's one that I
Interesting.
like.
I'll have to take a look at that. Because I hear all these people say, I know what my password is. It's the same thing for everything. That's a no-no, isn't it?
Well, it depends on like what are all
What
the
the
sides.
password is.
Yeah, but like if you play through that scenario,
Oh, yeah, I suppose.
like what if let's say tomorrow like Adobe gets compromised, because Adobe got compromised a little bit ago and leaked a bunch of usernames and passwords. What if you had the same password for Adobe that you had for your bank, and so
Oh,
now
yeah.
if that your email and password is a known thing on the internet, and then it's the same thing for some unrelated bank, which actually there's a website out there called haveibeenpwned.com.
Have I been what?
Pwned, Pwned.
Okay.
It's kind of a play on the have I been owned
Okay.
kind of thing. You can actually type in your email address and it'll tell you all the places that email address has shown up in known breaches, like on the dark web and various places like that. So you can actually there's some good guys out there too that are like releasing this information to everybody so you can see, hey, has my email address been compromised? Has my password been compromised? If it has, like, oh, maybe I should go think about using a different one if it's the same
Wow.
one.
That we'll have to get that. I'll get that from you again, and we'll put that in. We'll put that in the bottom of the. Send that out to people in our newsletter or something too, because that's interesting. Because people need to know that. Because I didn't even know that existed. And you said something in there. I'm not even looking at the script anymore.
Yeah,
You said
sorry.
something in there about the dark web.
Oh, yeah.
What in the hell is in there?
Yeah, so it sounds really scary and it's kind of a cool name that I think cybersecurity professionals have designated for it. But effectively, all it is parts of the internet that aren't indexed or aren't searchable.
Okay.
So, I mean, I bet Paragon's even got some stuff on the quote unquote dark
Eh.
web. If you have any URLs out there that maybe you're doing like development test or something that you don't want to show up in, it's like the opposite of SEO, like something you don't want to show up in Google that you basically don't advertise it to Google, you don't get it indexed, you don't have
Yeah.
links to other places. So more or less, the dark web is places like that that are not listed on Google search. And sometimes they'll have like extra things where you can only get through using a special VPN or different routes
Okay.
or something. But for the most part, it just means websites that aren't available
So it's not some
on
deep,
Google.
dark, secret place where the pagans hang out and they make it sound so horrible. But I mean, I'm sure there's some stuff down there you don't want to be looking at too. But I mean, it says, but yet it's just really non-indexed things that are
Yeah.
okay. That
And
makes sense.
It's a safer place for sometimes for criminals to hang out.
I
'Cause
suppose they're everywhere.
they don't want to be found.
Yeah, well, that's a good point there. So, what are some of the risks? Or we were talking about risk, but risks. What risks do businesses face when they don't have that strategy? I mean, or that cybersecurity strategy? They could lose banking information. They could be breached credit cards. I mean, what are some of? I mean, but talk about have you ever run into where somebody's held their files for ransom? That's a big one I'm hearing.
Yeah, luckily,
Knock on wood.
I've been at some places where there's been attempts at ransomware attacks. So basically, once again, kind of like we were talking about earlier, the key that hackers are looking for there is they're looking for ways to make money.
Yeah.
So what they'll do is they'll encrypt your file and make it so that only they know how to release the file back to you, and they want you to pay whatever money. Which, side note, I've actually found some of these places. They actually have really good support teams because they really want your money. So they'll have like the best support teams on earth to like help you figure out how much and where to put the money and all those kinds of things.
Wow.
I, knock on wood, personally haven't been involved in a lot of those attacks, but those can be very scary for a lot of businesses because like if you wake up one morning and now you can't access any of your files, you can't access any of your billing, that's a scary place to be. Now, I know a lot of companies, they develop very good and very solid backup strategies. So, like, a valid strategy might be, hey, like if I lose access to all my files, oh well, that's okay. I'm just going to restart from the backups. Other companies, they have insurance companies. They're like, well, I don't necessarily trust my backup, so I'm going to have insurance because then what insurance will do is insurance will pay out the ransom and then you get your files back. But that also is kind of a little bit scary because like if you're paying the attackers, well, what's to stop them from coming back again? Because like they know that there's money to be paid by the insurance, so then
And did they put something inside the files that'll let them access it again? Is that possible?
it is possible they could have embedded something when they if they have access to your system to run ransomware. Who's to say that they don't put new files on your system as well to maintain a persistent, we can call it backdoor, but basically
Right.
like a way into your network.
Well, I mean, we had that. We didn't knock on wood again. There's a lot of wood knocking going on here. But I mean, we had the oh shit, not the oh shit moment, but the aha moment, where one day Emma and I were just kind of talking. We said, well, we have all this stuff stored over here, and if something were to happen, whoa, what are we going to do? So we implemented a strategy to pull backups from where we have our stuff stored in the cloud to a local server that there's no access to the outside world.
Like
Yeah.
an air gapped.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that, but that's just one thing. You have your accounting systems in the cloud, and all this stuff is in the cloud. I mean, you put a lot of hope and not a hope, but a lot of faith in these companies that you're doing business with, that they've got good strategies in place. to maintain the security and the safety of your data.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a lot of faith involved with it. I mean, when you're doing all that stuff in the cloud, I mean, sometimes it kind of creeps me out. You're like, what happens if they get access to that? But so you have the insurance policies that back it up, and there are some things that can do that. But what are some security tips? I mean, how can a business owner keep themselves safe?
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about passwords.
Should you change them every quarter, every month, every week, every year? I mean, how often should you change a password? That I always have that question.
Yeah, actually, that was something I didn't bring up earlier, but yeah, I know a lot of companies have very strict policies where you change it like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That actually leads to some bad password practices as well, because like that, once again, it's like, what if you're changing your password like every quarter? Now, how are you going to remember it? It leads to people wanting to write it down more often. So one of the strategies that I've seen that I've started to get a little bit behind, that actually comes from the NIST standard as well, where you have a strong passphrase and then don't change it until you know that it showed up in a breach, or maybe if you want to change it once a year or something like that.
Okay.
But if you have a strong passphrase that you've personally never written down anywhere, and it's never been in a vulnerable spot, hey, keep running with it. But then if you do notice that it's been involved in a breach, or it shows up in a commonly used password list, or you wrote it down one day and you put it on a post-it note and then you forgot to put that post-it note in the shredder,
That's me.
and then feel free to go ahead and change it and be like, oh yeah, I don't know if that's quite safe. Change it.
So really, a good practice would be to go from the passcode to a passphrase.
Yeah,
I mean, really, that's kind of the takeaway I'm learning from that, is because
that's what I believe.
oh, well, it makes
I know
sense
there's
if you
some
think
debate,
but think about it. I mean, if that is something that you would only know, that you don't have on your social media, that you don't have out there, that you're the only person that's going to know that answer. I mean, the only way that they're really going to get access to anything that they have is if they get it out of you.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's really going to risk their life to not protect their password. But I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, it would be something that you really, truly you would know that you would never really have to change it.
Yeah, if it's never been out in the real world for any reason.
There's no sense to do it. That's interesting. So the term cybersecurity is kind of frightful. I mean, so what is your advice for small business owners or leaders who are trying to help their staff or themselves and to follow security practices? I mean, should they have something in place for all the things that they do in their business from a cybersecurity and have like plans and manuals? Is that something that should have a written down policies for some of these things?
Some of the things it does help. For example, like one thing that I was thinking about is, you think about how like easily, if somebody asks you for information, how easy it is to just give that information. So attackers use that sometimes, especially if a company doesn't have like a strategy or some steps in place. Like, for example, one thing that I think might be related to what Paragon does is, if you need access to a customer's social media site, I'm assuming you have like a standard and you have this relationship with the customer so that everybody's aware of what's going on and how it's happening. Right. Sometimes what attackers will do is, if a company doesn't have like some of these plans and strategies in place, they'll call up a random company and say, hey, I'm Bob from your IT company, or hey, I'm Bob from Paragon Marketing. I'm a brand new person. I've never worked here before, but I'm going to need access to all your social media accounts. And so having like at least some kind of like, well, wait a minute. Usually when Paragon reaches out, it's like Skip or Emma or Kristen or somebody
right.
that I have this relationship with. They're probably not going to like just throw a new person on me randomly that I've never talked to ever before that's calling me on my cell phone. So like having like some kind of like standard policy and procedure, like, hey, when we talk to Paragon and they're asking for passwords, this is how they do it and this is how they've always done it. And so if something's a little bit different, say something, or at least call up and say, hey, I'm noticing this is a little bit different. So having like some of those like strategies and policies in place can be useful, I think.
Now that you mentioned that, I mean, we really have they always have to be changed and evolved. I mean, because it's never. I mean, that's an ever-changing world, right?
Yeah.
So we've over the years we have developed that practice, and our clients do know that who's going to be calling.
Yeah.
But you do. That's true though. If you worked in a larger organization, they may not know, and then you're kind of then you don't want to be get your stuff in a position where you're SOL, you know?
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like if it's a different person calling you every day from like your marketing company or your vendor or whatever, have like some kind of procedure policy is a safer way to do it. Then you know what to expect.
Yeah, I think we do that up front. We tell them, look, if you get any other messages from like Meta or anything where they're saying it's like the IRS. They're never going to call you on the phone.
Yeah.
Google, they're never going to call and say, hey, how you doing?
Hey, I need Apple gift cards from you. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you just have to really, but it's tough though, because business owners, they wear a lot of hats. We talked about it a lot of times. And when they get that phone call, they see that frightening email, they see that frightening message, they say, hey, if you don't, you got to cop. The biggest thing like right now is in the meta world, they got this big copyright infringement thing going on.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone's getting blasted on their messenger saying, oh, you got a copyright. This is your last warning. But people are biting into that. Oh. And we tell people, please don't do that, because you're going to lose they're going to hack you. They've got your information. You're screwed. Don't answer anything. So we always tell people, if you don't see something, if it doesn't look right, don't click it. And I tell people that all the time in email. If it doesn't look right, don't click the button. Don't answer it, because you're just going to get, because you think about your inbox, even in your email all the time. I get like 400 emails a day, and only like 30 or 40 of them are the ones that I really need like urgent attention. The ones can wait, but then the rest of it's all crap. So it's tough to keep up on that too. But boy, now I'm going to bring up something, because I got to bring it up, because clients talk about it. We've talked a little bit about before this. AI.
Oh, yeah, fun.
The scary world of AI, where the robots are going to come and take over the whole world, and we're all going to be dying by robots. It could happen, I doubt it. But we talked about AI. It's now very more prominent than it ever has been. How long has AI really been around?
AI, in the sense of mathematical algorithms and equations to do predictions, has been around. Honestly, I don't know the exact date, but it's been around for decades at least. It's been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. So AI in the current sense is kind of interesting, because we were talking about it before the podcast. A year and a half, maybe it was 2 years ago now, you had this company OpenAI that posted a bunch of research about using these existing AI models that they had, but then they used large amounts of data. So like large portions of the internet, they shoved them at these prediction models, and then found out that they could predict like what appears to be like responses or answers to questions and things like that.
Yeah.
So AI itself, like the technology, has been around for a while. We just really haven't gotten to the point until recently where we could actually toss tons of data at it, and now we're seeing what happens with that. And part of it is also like the rise of more and more powerful GPUs, or graphics processing units.
Yeah, that's kind of the freaky one.
Yeah.
That one kind of, because Emma and I tried that one day. We said, let's draw a picture of Emma Opperman. And we tried that, and it pulled little bits and pieces of her. It didn't look just like her, but it was just like we were just playing with it. And she vowed last year, because I'm not going to go into AI all year. And then we went. I took her down the rabbit hole,
nice.
And she's like, "Oh, I went into it," but we just wanted to see what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I suppose, but does it really learn from itself? I mean, I guess that's one thing I don't understand.
So the learning from itself is still, it's not like a machine that's like by itself learning from itself. It's more of you have a model, like an AI model, mm-hmm. and then you take the output, and then you can do different things, like you can annotate it or tag it as a human being and say, okay, this was a good answer, this was a bad answer. I'm going to reward you for more and more good answers. And if you keep doing that over and over again and again, the model starts figuring out, hey, every time I use this word, the human tells me it's a bad answer, so I'm going to stay away from that.
Okay.
Or, hey, every time I respond in this way, I'm getting told that that's a good answer. And so over time, so it's kind of learning, but it's very
based
much
upon what the human is saying based upon that response.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which
all
is,
right.
I guess, technically
I guess
learning.
it is technically learning. This could be a whole different podcast,
Yeah.
all on its own. So we don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much, because I could keep you here for hours talking about that. All right. Well, that is a lot of valuable information, and there's probably tons more that you have. So if you got any questions for us after watching this podcast, drop us a line. We'll send it on to Matt. He can help you out as much as you can. But we're not letting you out of here without a game.
Oh.
Okay. We are going to do a game called Reverse Taboo. Okay.
Oh.
So this is what it's going to be. I'm going to give you 3 words, and then you have to tell me what the word I'm relating it to.
Oh,
So kind of like
okay.
password.
Okay.
Okay. So I've got 4 of them here. I'm gonna read off your clues, and you got to tell me what what these clues are relating to the word that I'm trying to get you to say. Okay. Bug, infection, disease.
Virus.
Very good.
Oh,
Perfect.
oh.
Spot on. That's awesome. Oh, you're
Nice.
gonna get this one. Oh, this is too easy. You got this one. Kidnap, hostage, pay.
Ransom.
Yes, sir. Very good. I
I'm thinking like all cybersecurity related words.
I know, and
and
you're
it's
doing
like,
you're
oh.
doing yeah. This is I should have been a little harder on these. All right. Anyways, data, cipher, or code.
Encryption. Oh,
You are
I was
spot
like, I
on.
didn't know if that was gonna be.
And for 5,000 points, Matt, 5,000 points, and the grand champion, security, prevent, barrier.
Firewall.
Bang.
Oh.
You are 4
Nice.
for 4. That is awesome, man. I don't think anybody's got 100%. That's awesome. Good job. Again,
I'm gonna have to thank Kristen for the game then.
Yeah, that's
She-
right.
She set me up.
oh, she did. She did. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, man. It was awesome. I learned a lot, and I'm like got my takeaways. We're gonna make some changes on stuff that we're gonna do, and what I'm gonna do is make sure people do phrases instead of doing passwords, because I'm guilty of using the same password everywhere, and I'm going to make that change today. I didn't tell anybody that, though. But thanks for joining us again today. For Matt Phelps, awesome information. I'm probably going to tap you up on something else, too. But thanks for watching today and learning about cybersecurity. If there's something else you want us to put on the podcast that you need to learn about, let us know. Be sure to watch us on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Rank us, like us, follow us, because we got a lot of cool things coming up in the future. Again, I'm Skip Ranke from the Main Street Marketing Podcast. Hope you have a great day and many, many successes. Thanks. Hey, thanks for watching the latest episode of the Main Street Marketing Podcast. We really hope you got some great information. If you know somebody else who can use it, share it and like it, because we want to help as many business owners as we can. And also, do not forget to hit the subscribe button and hit that bell, so as we release more episodes, we can give you even more content to help you in your business. Thanks.